good afternoon everybody. Thanks for attending the training session today. My name is David Harradine and I'm the trainer today. I'll be presenting identification and control of hazards in the warehouse. So the course that you're doing, you're going to be spending time in the warehouse conducting stock takes, moving stock around. It's very important that before you enter the warehouse environment that you check the warehouse for any hazards and risks that have the potential to cause harm. So starting with the intended learning outcomes, this training session will aim to equip learners with an understanding of the common types of hazards that can be encountered in the warehouse during a stock take, an understanding of the hazard management process to be followed before conducting a stock take in a warehouse, the ability to identify workplace hazards and the ability to complete a hazard identification form, the ability to apply the hierarchy of controls to manage hazards, an understanding of the control measures that can be applied to mitigate hazards before undertaking a stock take, and we're going to satisfy the work health and safety requirements of Coordinate Stock Takes unit, which is the unit that you guys are doing. Let's start with a bit of housekeeping and a bit of evacuation procedures. First of all, if you could all put your phones on silent for the duration of the session. In the event of any emergency, please exit via the door and out, turn left and head to the fire stairs, down the fire stairs and into the car park, which is the emergency evacuation assembly area. And if you could all please complete the sign-on sheet. Let's start with you, Noel. Thank you. Okay, so let's start here with what is a hazard? Well, Safe Work South Australia states that a hazard is a situation in the workplace that has the potential to harm the health and safety of people or the potential to damage plant and equipment. The situation could involve a task, a chemical, or equipment used. Common types of hazards. Now, common types of hazards that we may encounter in the warehouse during a stock take. Manual tasks, that means when we're moving boxes around, when we're lifting, we can encounter a hazard. Gravity, this means items that may fall from shelves and land on us and cause an injury. Electricity, we all know the dangers of electricity and the hazards involved there. Machinery and equipment, I've mentioned forklifts there. It's a busy environment, there's forklifts driving around, and obviously forklifts can definitely cause harm. Hazardous chemicals, a lot of warehouses contain storage drums full of chemicals. If they spill, obviously it's a great hazard for us. Extreme temperatures, not all warehouses are very well ventilated. They can get very hot, especially in the environment that we're in here. And noise. We can damage our hearing due to many hours of being exposed to excessive noise. These are just some of the common types of hazards in the warehouse. Of course, there's more as well. Hazard categories. Now, there's 5 main categories of hazards that we can encounter in the warehouse. First of all, mechanical. Now, this one is machinery, such as forklifts, pallet trucks. We also can have vehicles coming in and out. We've really got to keep our eyes open and make sure that we're aware of the hazard that's presented by these vehicles that are moving around in the warehouse. Ergonomical. Now, this refers to lifting or working in an awkward position or repetitive motions. Any of these are a great hazard. They can physically harm us and we might end up with a long-term injury from doing things the wrong way. The next one is physical. Now that means noise, radiation or heat, obviously hazards that we're going to encounter. Biological, so we could have bacteria, viruses, there could be things caught in packages or from other people. And chemical, we've got gases, liquids, there's dust, all of these can be a hazard to our health. Now, failure to control these hazards could result in what kind of emergencies in the warehouse? Can you guys think of any kind of emergencies that might arise if we're exposed to any of those hazards that were mentioned on the previous one? And we'll put them up here on the flip chart.
So fatigue would be someone who's operating a forklift?
Sure, yeah, fatigue. For someone operating a forklift, definitely, because you become drowsy, fatigued, you don't concentrate, you might make a mistake,
Yep.
you could bump into a person or a shelf and things will fall down. Yeah, that's a good one.
You can even hurt yourself, like you say, I don't know, due to heating or the chemicals and so on, can burn your skin.
True.
Or things like that.
Yep, definitely.
But I don't know how to classify it.
No, that's okay. We'll say physical injury.
Yeah,
Let's put that there. That would definitely be an emergency situation and we'd have to call an ambulance to help someone who got burnt or crushed or had dangerous chemicals spilt on them.
And it could be stress, workload,
Yep, true.
lots of work to do.
Stress, yeah, that's a good one, Sajid. I'll mention that for sure. And that's what you call a psychological hazard, isn't it?
Mental or psychological.
Mental, exactly. Okay, great. Thanks for contributing those. Here's a couple more that we could consider to be emergency situations that can occur in the warehouse. Fire. We have materials building up, somebody drops a cigarette or there's a spark from the forklift or something like that and all of a sudden we've got a fire. Electrocution from electrical wire that's exposed. We could have crush injuries from stock falling down from the shelves and landing on us. We could be crushed by a forklift. That's a very real danger and something that actually happens quite often in warehouses where forklifts hit people. We could have back injuries from unsafe lifting techniques. People who are moving boxes, if they're not bending their knees and lifting properly, they could certainly strain their back and it could be a long-term injury. Then we have lost time injury, we have to send people for medical visits, there's workers' compensation facilities. Broken bones from slips, trips and falls. People spill liquid on the floor, the next person comes along and slips over, they could break their bones. It's a dangerous situation as well. So what unsafe practices could cause emergencies in the warehouse? What are some of the unsafe things that people might do in a warehouse that ends up with injuries or emergencies?
First one, like you said, smoking in the warehouse.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's a good one, definitely. We'll put that down. Definitely not a good idea to smoke in the warehouse because this is going to lead to fire. Thanks, Stephen.
Okay.
Blocking the exits of the warehouse.
Definitely, yeah, that's a good one. What if we had this fire and all of a sudden we tried to escape via the exits and they were blocked? Okay, thanks, Sajid.
Can also add not wearing protective equipment like glasses, you say for the noise, the thing that you put to cover
Definitely.
noise reduction
Yep.
and so on.
That's a good one. So we call that PPE, personal protective equipment. So let's put that there. All good warehouses should have PPE available for the workers to wear, and not wearing it, you're definitely going to expose yourself to injury.
We can add on fire extinguishers and first aiders.
Yep. Yep. Not having fire extinguishers would be a pretty bad one. And like a first aid kit.
Yeah.
a trained person in first
First aid,
aid as well.
Yeah.
We always want to have somebody fully trained up on first aid.
Yeah.
That's great, thanks a lot, very good. Okay, so I've put a few here myself. Poor housekeeping, so if we have excess waste, it creates fire hazard. Leaving waste around can also block the fire exits, like you guys said. Unreported faults. So we know that something's wrong with the forklift, it's leaking oil, it's not working properly, the wheel bearings are loose. All of a sudden we have an emergency where it falls apart and hurts someone. Unsafe work practices such as stacking shelves incorrectly or overloading shelving. So if we're putting things on the shelves too close so they can fall down, or putting far too much weight on the shelves, they can collapse, can't they? You can have unsafe storage and handling of dangerous goods and hazardous materials. These hazardous materials need to be stored very carefully where there's ventilation, so if they do spill, dangerous gases don't harm people. And unsafe use of forklifts. Again, there's the one that we keep mentioning, the forklifts, and just how dangerous they can be if they're not used safely and by licensed people. Okay, so now we'll move on to hazard management. We understand that there's these hazards in the warehouse. How do we manage them so that people don't become harmed by them? Identifying hazards in the workplace is the starting point for the hazard management process. Hazard identification should be an integral part of workplace culture involving everyone in the workplace. Identification can range from employees reporting any hazardous situations that may occur to their employer to a formal and regular workplace inspection. Now, that's something that's very important, and what you guys are going to be doing today. We're walking through the warehouse and we're formally checking to make sure that none of these hazards are there, and if they are there, identifying them and doing something about them before we start work. And you always must remember that all of you have a duty of care to manage hazards under the Work Health and Safety Act 2011. The legislation states that you have a duty of care to ensure that you don't undertake any unsafe work practices that might injure you or others. And you can be held personally responsible, you can be fined, you can be sent to prison. Not only you, but your manager as well, for not ensuring that you maintain a safe workplace. Now, again, with hazard management, there's a simple way of describing the hazard management process, which is the SAFER approach. First of all, you see it, you identify those hazards, and you place them on a hazard identification form. You assess it. You conduct a risk assessment and you use a risk matrix, which I'll be showing you all in a little while. You fix it. You undertake risk control. You apply the hierarchy of hazard controls. And you evaluate it. Finally, you review it. You continually review to make sure that the controls that you've applied are still working in a week from now, 3 weeks, 6 months, because things change. People might move shelves around, you might get a new forklift that needs different kind of safety procedures. We're always using this as a continual process. And the best way for us to record any hazards that we see in the warehouse is to record them on a hazard identification form. Now, the hazard identification form you should carry with you when you first enter the warehouse, and you complete it. First of all, the first column, hazard. So you've seen that there's a spill on the floor. Somebody spilled water, and this could be slippery. Someone might slip over and break some bones here. You write down in the first column, spilt water is the hazard. What is the harm that the hazard could cause? Well, it could cause broken bones if people slip over. What's the likelihood that the harm would occur? That's where we're going to use what's called the risk matrix, which I'll show you in a moment. You also calculate the level of risk, and you check if there's any current controls. Is there any procedure in place at the moment to make sure that that spilled water is mopped up? Can we put a sign there saying wet floor? Is anything available for you? What further controls are required? And in the final section, it's to ensure that follow-up is done. You can't just see it, tell someone and then walk away, because we all know something might not be done. Best to record who's going to do the action, the due date, and was it completed. Then we can keep this form on file if we ever need to refer to it to show that we did something. That's right. Okay, so here we have the risk matrix. Now this allows us to assess the likelihood and the impact. We've seen that there's a hazard, which is a wet floor. Now we want to work out what is the chance that injury will happen. So we have a look and we say, well, it's quite likely if I walk on that wet floor that I might slip over. And what's the chance, what's the impact if I do slip over? Well, it's moderate, I think. There's a moderate chance that I'm going to injure myself. So we go up, we go across, likely, plus moderate. That's right, Stephen, it's medium 2. So it's in yellow. Anything in yellow, orange or red, we must act upon immediately. So there's a medium risk. We need to do something about it, like mopping up the floor and putting a sign there saying wet floor, exactly. And even checking what's the cause of the spill. Checking the ceiling, is there a leaking pipe, something that's causing this water spill. So in order to address the hazard that you've found, which is our wet floor, we are going to apply the hierarchy of controls. And you've got your choice when you look at this wet puddle on the floor. You can eliminate it by physically removing the hazard. That would be the best idea, getting a mop and removing it. And as we can see over there, we've got a scale, most effective. So certainly, physically removing the puddle is going to be the best approach. If you can't do that, you need to substitute. You can replace the hazard. If you can't do that, the next option is engineering controls. Isolate people from the hazard. Maybe put up some barriers. If you don't have a mop and there's no way to clean it up, put up barriers which isolates people. People then physically can't step in the puddle. The next step, if you're not able to put in engineering controls, change the way people work. Don't let people into that area of the warehouse at all today. Entry is not allowed today for that part. And finally, if we have to live with the puddle on the floor every day and we can't stop it.
Very good shoes.
Yep, some good shoes, exactly. Protect the worker with personal protective equipment. Give them non-slip shoes that aren't going to slip over. And maybe give them a helmet, so if they do slip over, we're going to wear any kind of personal protective equipment that's going to protect us. Of course, as we see, that would be the least effective approach. Let's try not to get to this stage where we have to live with the puddle every day. Let's try to eliminate first and foremost. Okay, now we're going to do a little group activity where we identify 2 hazards in this scenario here inside a warehouse. And we're going to use the risk matrix to assess the risk level and then apply a control method. So I'm going to give all of you the risk matrix. And I'm also going to give you the hierarchy of controls diagram. Thank you. Okay, so let's have a little bit of a look at the picture for a moment and then let's pick out 2 very risky, hazardous behaviours that we're seeing here.
Waterborne then.
Okay, Noel, you've got one?
Yeah, so there's a pool of water that he's walking into. He's on the phone, I think.
Exactly.
Yep.
There it is. Well done.
Yeah,
Well
on
spotted.
the Fox there is a person.
Over here,
Yeah.
very dangerous as well.
Yes.
The one on the ladder, unsafe.
Very unsafe. Look,
Yeah.
he's reaching up. He's by himself. He's stacked on 2 pallets
Exactly.
there.
Yeah.
The forklift is going over the
Walk
person.
Exactly. What if this tips down? It
Yeah.
could kill him if it lands on him.
There's a loose wire there on the left hand side.
down
I
here.
think the drill is the
Yep,
drill, yeah.
exactly.
Like
Someone's
someone
left
walking.
that there. This
Yeah.
guy can't see where he's going because of all the boxes. He's going to trip on that,
Yeah.
and he's going to fall over and injure
The
himself.
person beside that may be already falling. Seems like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
looks like it there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is someone trying to get on top of the shelf on the right hand side top?
Over here.
No,
On the
no,
right top.
right.
Oh, sorry. Yes,
Yeah.
over here.
There's a box almost at the edge of it.
Very bad. Very dangerous behaviour. Exactly. Here's a spilled chemicals here as well.
And proper technique of lifting the box.
Yes.
This one.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Garbage, is that garbage there? Dustbin, there's little dustbins next to the exit. The fire exit, is that blocked?
Yes, it's blocked. Exactly what we spoke about before.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's choose this one.
Yeah.
And let's have a look at our risk matrix. And let's assign the risk to this hazard. We've seen that there's a hazard of blocked fire exit.
Yeah.
So let's just say a fire broke out. We're going to decide what the likelihood and the impact. A fire is probably fairly low chance of a fire,
Yeah.
but if there is a fire, what's the impact of having a blocked fire exit?
Yeah.
Very high.
So you,
Very high.
just to go a step back, in this case I think someone is smoking there behind the...
They
Yes.
are.
Yeah.
Yes, they are.
So the chance of fire is more...
There you go, well spotted. Okay, very good. So let's upgrade it then to,
To 2.
what do we
Likely.
suggest?
It's likely.
Yep, so it's likely that a fire will start with this guy smoking there.
Mm.
And then what's the impact? What's the chance that people might die?
I would say high.
Yeah, I would say high.
Yep, so we're going to class this as 3 high. That's great. So we're going to say block exit of smoking. The hazard is fire, and using our risk matrix, high. It needs immediate attention. Okay, so that's our first one, and which one would we like to do the analysis on for our next hazard?
I would say the person driving the forklift.
This one.
The one who's the right one, yeah.
This guy here?
Is he on the phone? Is that issue?
And he's driving where
On the walk path.
where this walk path, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well spotted.
Yeah, that's a
Definitely, he's not looking where he's going.
Exactly.
This is for pedestrians to
Yeah.
walk along here, and he's got these big forks sticking out the front
Exactly.
if he hits someone.
Yeah.
So let's have a look at our risk matrix here.
very likely. He's going to hit someone, obviously.
Yeah, I agree. So very likely, and then what's the impact going to be if he hits someone with those forks while he's moving along?
Definitely major.
Yeah.
That will drive from me.
Yeah.
Here, because someone gonna fall down, and definitely if no helmet or something, they're gonna jerk you on the head.
Yeah, yeah,
So
I agree. So we're going to say that one's extreme.
Yeah.
So forklift, not watching.
Careless driving. Obviously.
It is, isn't it? Definitely careless driving, pedestrian injury. And we've decided that it's extreme 5. Okay, so now that we've identified these as our 2, we're going to look at our next handout, which was the hierarchy of controls. And going back to our first one, which was blocked exit and smoking, which could be a fire. It needs to be addressed immediately. What do you think we'll do based on this?
The first thing we will stop the person who's smoking.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Put some sign no smoking.
Yeah. Exactly. So we're applying a control, which is elimination.
Mhm.
The hazard of smoking is being cut out, and therefore we've applied elimination. And what should we do about this?
So we'll
Clean that.
try to
Clear
remove
the
the
exit.
We will. Exactly. We're going to clear that, and once again, we physically removed the hazard.
Yeah.
So we haven't needed to move down the hierarchy of controls. We've got the best case scenario, which was staying with elimination. So that's very good, everyone. And on our next one, which was the forklift, where the man's not watching and they're talking on the phone, there's a good chance you could hit one of these pedestrians.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at our hierarchy of controls.
First thing you can stop him and take the phone away, because that's the major reason he was not concentrating while driving the forklift.
Yeah, that's right. So I agree. So elimination as well.
Yeah.
Physically removing the hazard. This walkway looks like it's in a pretty busy part of the warehouse where people need to cross.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not the best spot for the pedestrian walkway.
Yeah.
Maybe
That's right.
it should go
Sideways.
Towards the side.
Yeah.
something like that. So that would be using one of the others down here rather than elimination.
And also, since you're mentioning it, maybe train the guy properly. You didn't have a proper training.
Yeah.
That is, when you operate the machine, you are not allowed to
Use the phone.
use the phone and be more attentive of what you're doing, because there are people, life at risk.
Yeah, I agree with you, Stephen. So that would be classed as administrative controls. Change the way people work.
Yeah.
So we're moving down and we're going to apply administrative controls, and we're going to apply engineering controls by moving the pedestrian pathway, which is going to allow us to isolate people from all these hazards down here in the busy area of the warehouse. Okay, that's great. You guys seem to have a good understanding of it, so very good. Let's move on. Now you're going to do your own one. We've got an assessment activity here where you're going to undertake hazard identification in the warehouse prior to conducting our planned stock take. You're going to record the hazards that you identify on the hazard identification form that I'm going to provide to you. So here's a hazard ID form. And you're going to assess the level of risk associated with the hazard by using the risk matrix that we all just used then. We're going to start here. I need for all of you to identify the hazard. What hazard can you see here? Record it on your hazard ID form and assess the level of risk and the appropriate control method. So the hazard ID form will prompt you. If you start in the far left-hand column, yeah, please go across and fill in each of the cells as you go across the sheet by looking at this picture here. And you've got 3 minutes to do this one. Thanks.
Yeah, just
Okay, has everyone done that one? Okay, great. So if we finish that one, we're going to do another one now. And I'll give you guys another 3 minutes for this one. So it's the same exercise that we did just then. You're going to identify the hazard that you can see here, record it on your hazard ID form, and assess the level of risk and the appropriate control methods for this. Okay, if everybody's happy to move on, there's just one more to be done as part of the assessment. Once again, we need to identify the hazard and report on your hazard ID form what you can see as a hazard here, and assess the level of risk and the appropriate control method. Okay, looks like everyone's finished. Great, so thank you. And let's move on and we'll discuss a little bit what we saw just then. So the hazards that you identified on your hazard ID forms during your walkthrough of the warehouse prior to conducting the stock take must be acted upon immediately. We saw some things there that could really cause harm to people, so we need to act on those and remove the hazards or apply the appropriate control measures in order to mitigate the hazards. So using the hierarchy of hazard controls, we needed to identify the most appropriate control methods for the hazards that you identified. So the first one that we saw there was this situation where we've got someone using unsafe lifting techniques. And what we didn't see in the photo anywhere was signage, work health and safety posters showing safe working and lifting techniques. It doesn't look like he's been trained, so obviously there's training required. Does anybody have any other comments about that picture that we saw? The unsafe lifting.
You mentioned about the steel-toed boots.
Great.
The building was using steel-toed boots to be.
That's right. That's a good one, Noel. So he wasn't wearing the correct PPE. There was no steel-toe boots. If we put aside the fact that he was using unsafe lifting techniques, if he did lift and get off balance and drop that on his foot, he could have broken his toes. So we need to apply PPE and training and some posters showing correct lift techniques like this. We should have a poster like that, or we can have a poster like this up on the wall. The next one we saw was this situation where we've got the forklift coming along and this man walking past, and he's got a very high chance of being badly injured here. The forklift doesn't have a flashing light. There's no pedestrian markings on the floor. What other comments did you guys have about this one?
Even PPE for the people who's working inside
The forklift.
Yeah, he was driving and even he was walking. They had a reflector.
Yep.
That would have more visibility.
Definitely. Yep, I completely agree. And here we go. This is showing the kind of control methods that should be applied here. They're wearing their hard hats, there's a flashing light on top of the forklift, and they're wearing reflective safety vests. They're high visibility, and he's had his appropriate training, and they're communicating with each other. So this is definitely the way to avoid the injury situation that we could have seen there. And our final one was this quite messy situation here where we've got the cords on the floor. What do we think could happen here?
Electrocution.
There's electrocution and there's a trip hazard, Sajid, exactly. That's right. So we're going to deal with it like this. We're going to put a nice high visibility strip over the cabling, and here at the front of the room, in this room, you can see where that's been applied as well. And because it's ramped like that, people aren't going to trip over it. It's hiding those wires, less chance of electrocution and much less chance of tripping. So this is an engineering control. The wires still need to be there because we have to have power for our equipment, but we've applied engineering controls to it. Okay, so we've come towards the end of the session. You've all participated very well. Thank you for that. If we just go over a little summary of what we've covered in the session. The hazards that are commonly encountered in the warehouse were covered. The emergency situations that can arise in the warehouse were covered as well. You guys did some good brainstorming and we've recorded what those were. The hazard identification procedures and the risk matrix were covered off. We conducted the assessment, which was completion of your hazard identification forms. And we covered the hazard management techniques, engineering controls, elimination, substitution, PPE, which is our personal protective equipment. And I feel that all of you will probably be well equipped now to coordinate stock takes in the warehouse, which, as we know, can be a hazardous environment, but made a lot safer if we apply what we've learnt here today. So finally, if I can just ask all of you to complete some learner feedback forms that we have here.